you when Rabbi Weiner was rabbi here?
I guess from years 16 through 20, well, no, not that long. I was just here a couple of years when the rabbi was here. So I guess 18, 19.
What do you remember about those years?
Everything. Rabbi Weiner had a huge impact in changing my life. He had a huge impact in changing a lot of kids' lives. I was lost in high school, and Rabbi Weiner had study groups that we went to of our age at the time, and I don't know, it was jammed in, probably 20, 25 students my age, and we went over to his house once a week, and we studied everything, but one of the things that I can remember was I had trouble memorizing. And he gave me this little thing that I have never lost, which was to think of the most abstract, ridiculous thing in the world. And all right, let me give you an example. Say the world. I couldn't think of the world. So what do? Think of the world sitting on top of an elephant.
How old were you when Rabbi Weiner was rabbi here?
I guess from years 16 through 20, well, no, not that long. I was just here a couple of years when the rabbi was here. So I guess 18, 19.
What do you remember about those years?
Everything. Rabbi Weiner had a huge impact in changing my life. He had a huge impact in changing a lot of kids' lives. I was lost in high school, and Rabbi Weiner had study groups that we went to of our age at the time, and I don't know, it was jammed in, probably 20, 25 students my age, and we went over to his house once a week, and we studied everything, but one of the things that I can remember was I had trouble memorizing. And he gave me this little thing that I have never lost, which was to think of the most abstract, ridiculous thing in the world. And all right, let me give you an example. Say the world. I couldn't think of the world. So what do? Think of the world sitting on top of an elephant.
How old were you when Rabbi Weiner was rabbi here?
I guess from years 16 through 20, well, no, not that long. I was just here a couple of years when the rabbi was here. So I guess 18, 19.
What do you remember about those years?
Everything. Rabbi Weiner had a huge impact in changing my life. He had a huge impact in changing a lot of kids' lives. I was lost in high school, and Rabbi Weiner had study groups that we went to of our age at the time, and I don't know, it was jammed in, probably 20, 25 students my age, and we went over to his house once a week, and we studied everything, but one of the things that I can remember was I had trouble memorizing. And he gave me this little thing that I have never lost, which was to think of the most abstract, ridiculous thing in the world. And all right, let me give you an example. Say the world. I couldn't think of the world. So what do? Think of the world sitting on top of an elephant. Well, the study group did several things. We studied Torah a little bit. We studied current events of the day. And I'm sure you've probably heard this from others, but I'll tell you our story. He had made arrangements for us to go to the Hamilton Cathedral on Christmas Eve. Nobody else has said this, okay? And we, the group, and again, about 20 of us, and all the regulars, and he had made a pact with the priest, and we were going to sit at the back and all that, and it would have been really quite a great learning experience, except the parents found out about it and stopped it, our parents being the Jewish community, and we wound up staying at his house, eating roasted chestnuts, watching it on TV, and it was just a phenomenal time. You know, what he was trying to do is open our minds, and with me it worked. I know it worked with a lot of other people, but I needed that kind of help. And did it make a difference? It made all the difference in the world to me, because I'm a better person for it. I became the person I am, and Rabbi Weiner had a great deal to do with it, and his wife. Anita was just wonderful, because they were partners in this whole thing, and he was the right person at the right time for me. Well, going back to that example of memorizing, he never gave you answers. What he did was open things up, and that was his study groups in particular. And by opening things up, he forced you to come to your own conclusions. And they were never wrong. They were just a perspective, and it was a wonderful perspective, which I think is partly how we got to the point of going on that trip to Israel, because it was an exploration. It was an opportunity that I would never have thought of in my life. My parents we would, in those days, it just wasn't an option. And he made it an option, I know, with financial help as well, but it was an opportunity to learn. And yes, I became the sponge that most kids might have been at 9, 10, 11, 12. I became a little bit later, because I think it was 18, 19 when we went on the trip to Israel. And he did that with almost everything that he did with us. And I know he was criticized for it a little bit, because he spent a great deal of time with the youth, a great deal of time. And I know some of the adults didn't like it, but you know, any of the adults who realize that's what a rabbi should be doing, the adulation should have been going all the time. They probably didn't, but it helped people like me, and I guess I'll stick to myself, because I know there were many others. It helped us grow up, and it helped us appreciate who he was. And it helped me, because I'm sitting in the middle of Beth Jacob right now, the new section, and I have a love of Beth Jacob, and a lot of it had to do with him. Not just him, but it was the positive experience that I had in Hamilton growing up. Some of the older generation, wanted them to visit him, and he did all the things about going to Shiva houses and all that, but his emphasis was on the youth. And he had us, and we basically would have done anything he wanted us to do. And we weren't cheap by any stretch. But when you're learning in such a positive, warm environment, why would you ever think of turning away? And that's what I did, and I know a lot of us did. We had that opportunity, and even in those days when I was young and naive, I was smart enough to know I was getting something very special, and he was very special. Well, it was the Martin Luther King time, and it was right around that time, I think, maybe a little earlier than that. He was trying to do what I think a rabbi should do. A rabbi is a teacher. And he was trying to teach a congregation that, it was a traditional congregation, that, like most others are even now. And he was trying to bring us along as a group and learn, and that's why I said we did it as study groups at his house as well. You take current events and use them as a learning tool and to learn about yourself, because that's what it's all about. The more you learn about yourself, the better. And that transition. It wasn't learning facts in school, because that was never my forte, but it was learning things that made me more aware of myself and more opportunistic to take what came along. Anita Weiner was the matriarch of the family, to say the least. Anita was the stability. Anita was the brains as well. They were such a wonderful partnership. I'd be lying if I didn't equate that to my relationship with my wife, because I think we are partners. And I think I learned about our true relationship through Anita and Rabbi Weiner, because I think theirs was honest, it was pure, it was true. Their kids were right in the middle of everything. Their kids were very young when we had our study groups, and never ever did he try to get them out of the room or anything like that. And of course we all had a tremendous affection for them, but with Anita, everything was honest, everything was open, everything was okay. And you're not used to that in the traditional thing. This has to happen. There's no such thing as this has to happen. There's always got to be a reason, and we were taught to ask why all the time, and Anita had a great deal to do with that. On the trip to Israel, it's like she was the major guide. He led all of us, obviously, but she knew a great deal about all the places we went. She knew how to take care of us, because I think there were 50 people who hadn't really been away from home very much. And I don't mean in a motherly way, although she did some of that too. It just was a very special time, and she had a great deal to do with it. Getting ready for the trip to Israel involved, obviously, the packing, getting ready. But for whatever reason, and I don't remember why, we had to put on a skit for the parents here in the synagogue, of which I still have pictures, because somehow or other I got dressed up as a girl with a kerchief around my neck, and we did it, as a parting way, and all the parents were there. It was in the auditorium downstairs, the stage that's still there, and it was a riot. And we left on the bus right after that, and the bus took us to New York, and we left from New York. Zim lines, and again, without naming names, one of my roommates got sick before we ever left the dock, more upstairs than anywhere, and you'd have to look up who my roommate was, but it was a wonderful trip. We had Louis Stolman, who was our doctor. We had everything that you could possibly want. I think the trip itself, going across the ocean, may have been 7 or 8 or 9 days. And we went to Greece and Italy and Gibraltar. And here's another little known fact that may not make it through the editing part of this. We went to Athens one night, and the rabbi took us to what wound up being a nightclub, an outdoor nightclub. And the major presentation was basically a sex act. He didn't know it, obviously, and they didn't do it, but they basically, the whole dance, that's what it was about. And once Anita realized what was going on, she couldn't get us out of there fast enough, but it was just one of the fun parts. But the whole trip, the experience, I've never been back to Athens since, and we went to Greece and Gibraltar, and then Israel for a month. And one of the many things, it was just, again, part of being a sponge and learning everything. One of the things we did was work on a kibbutz for, I think, about a week, maybe not quite that much. And my whole family was in the chicken business in Hamilton. And my uncle had a chicken farm up on the mountain, and they did wholesale, they supplied the chicken roost the whole time. I got to clean out chicken coops for a week. I hated every second of it, burned my clothes at the end, but it was an experience, obviously, I have never forgotten. As was that whole trip. I bought a tallis when I was over. I bought tallises for Talisim for my brother and my dad. That was my gift to them. It was Rob Till growing up, and a lot of other people, and some of the relationships I had last, for as long as anybody could hope they would last. We moved out of Hamilton right after we got back. My dad's business went south, and we moved to Ottawa, so I didn't have the experience after that of sticking around and going over things, but I believe we had one reunion a couple of years later. And when the next trip went the next year, I came back to Hamilton to work in the summers at Camp Kadima. My friend Robbie Gubler and I followed the bus that was going to Montreal on the second trip because there was not enough room for the luggage underneath the bus. So we rented a U-Haul trailer and drove all day to Montreal, and when we dropped them off, we drove all night coming back, which was probably not a bright idea, and you'd have to be an adolescent teenager to be willing to do that, because I don't think either one of us could see the following morning, but we got that off too. But as far as our trip is concerned, the sights were wonderful, the relationships were even better.
I hear you met David Ben-Gurion.
Yes.
Do you remember that one?
Yes, I do. I can't remember the name of the place we met him at, but that was very special. But we got used to the special. We got used to being treated very specially the whole time we were over there. And I remember there's a picture, which I may have somewhere, of all of us standing around, and Ben-Gurion was in the middle. And yeah, that was, to be honest with you, I didn't realize how much of a great man he was at the time. I was a little bit too young for that. And so, the later in years, as I began to realize, oh my God, we actually met Ben-Gurion, and we all met him. We all said hello to him. We all shook his hand. And the other extreme to that was we also visited Carmel Winery, and most of us got back to the bus somehow. The free wine was quite something, and obviously none of us were big drinkers, and it didn't take very much. But there is the video. You must have the video of the trip. There is a video of that trip, including the skits I told you about before, and a lot of the stuff. So from what I'm seeing from the narrator, you may have to find it. But yeah, there was a video made of the whole trip.